All right, it's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get rolling here.
Conference
If you
wise.
could Call the roll, please.
Yep.
Scott?
Mario Ryan,
Here.
Bart Bartles,
Here.
Morgan Johnston,
Here.
Todd Russ,
Here.
Andrew Stump,
Here.
Pam Wojcik, Stephen Wall.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda for this evening? I do have one that Jim Angel has joined us today to talk to us a little bit about the Bulletin 70 that was in our packet. Just give us a little bit of a overview of it and take any of our technical questions and talk a little bit about some of the study that went behind it and what's planned for the future. And if folks would be all right with having that come directly after the public input items so we can get you in and out of here without further ado, unless you would like to stay for the rest of our meeting, which you are amply welcome to do but might not want to. So is there any objection to hearing from that point? All right. Let's take a look at the minutes from our previous meeting. Let me get a motion on the floor, and then if we have any changes, we can take it as amendments to the motion. Is there a second?
I can say.
Okay. Are there any changes to the agenda or to the minutes from this time? Okay. All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, those are approved. And I see we do have a number of members of the public with us this evening. Does anybody wish to address us before we dig into the agenda? All right, welcome. And we'll move along to our communications, and we'll hear from Jim Angel. I think everybody knows he is our state climatologist, and it seems like probably most everybody here has already met him. So
Yeah, that's right. People learn. Well, so I guess it was actually Kim that alerted me that part of the discussion was on Bulletin 70 and the newer NOAA Atlas 14. So just kind of give you just a brief history. The briefest of history is that I worked on Bulletin 70 many years ago with Floyd Hoff. It became the kind of the standard for engineering and design throughout the state. And it was actually a state-funded study by IDOT back in the mid-1980s. And historically, the way they've done these things is you get as much historical data as you can get, and then you do calculations to figure out, okay, what's the once-in-100-year event, or what's the once-in-5-year event. And if you got a lot of data, you felt like you were in pretty good shape. You had a pretty good solid idea of what the numbers were going to look like. Well, starting about the 1980s, we started to think about climate change, and in fact, Bulletin 70 we did a little trick there where we actually gave more weight to the more recent record, because even at that point we could see that it was getting wetter in the more recent decades, and that trend has continued since then. So we've that one covers the period from about 1900 to about 1980. And since then, since 1981 and onward, we've also seen an increase in precipitation. In fact, for Champaign-Urbana, records go back to 1888, and historically we've seen probably about a 10% increase over the entire historical record, so it's gone from about 36 inches to 40 inches. And then, not only that, but we think most of that change is occurring with the heavy rainfall events, so we're getting more 1 inch to 2 inch to 4 inch rain events, and now those are the ones that are more problematic. So, so we did that study, came out in the late 1980s. NOAA did a study, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration did a study, came out about 2004, had additional years of data, but paradoxically, some of their numbers were lower than ours. And for reason I don't fully understand. I don't know if it's the methodology or what was going on there, but their numbers came out lower, and so it hasn't been as widely used as our study in Illinois. I think some municipalities give you the option of using one or the other, but you have to use the higher number. It says ours usually we're a little higher. That's been the case. So that's where we've stood for a number of years, but we've always been aware that there's this trend towards more heavy rain events, So every year I've been getting more and more questions about when are you gonna update Bulletin 70? And so we've been in conversation with the state. The original group that funded the Bulletin 70 project was at IDOT, now they're at IDNR Water Resources. So we talked to them about trying to get some money in the budget, not for this year, it would be for next year's budget. It's, I won't say too much more about that, but it's, who knows how that will play out in the next year's budget. But we're also, there's a HUD grant coming up that's dealing with kind of sustainability issues, but also, well, in our case, they're looking at a lot of mitigation issues as well from climate change. So we're thinking we might be able to get some money out of that project too. If that, we're currently applying for that grant, so if we got funded for that, it'd probably be a year from now before we really got started on that one. Or if we went with the state route, that would also be about a year from now before we got started on the actual project. So we're looking for money. What we'd like to do is get one pot of money so we can do the whole state. We'd rather not do piecemeal work for Urbana and then Champaign and then Bloomington and so forth. So we're trying to, and there's actually an economy of scale in that. It doesn't cost that much more to do the city or the state than it does a particular city. So we're looking at those kinds of options right now. So I'm a little bit optimistic despite the gloom and doom on the budget side, just because they gotta have these numbers to do these projects. In fact, the city of Chicago's been after us for a while now about updating numbers for the city, because they've got, you know, literally hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects they've got to work on, and so they want the most up-to-date numbers for that. So the only final thing I would say on that is that historically these have been pretty straightforward engineering kind of studies. You just get the data, you crunch the numbers, and you come up with an answer. But the twist in all this, of course, is climate change and how that's going to play out. I would say, in general, I'm pretty confident of the projections of future climate change in terms of the temperatures. Most of the models are pretty consistent about that we're going to be warmer. It's just a matter of how much. Those same models on the precipitation side are a little more scattered. Some are showing us being wetter, some are showing us being drier. And that's it for the seasonal numbers. If you try to look at them for how much or how many more, 2-inch events or 4-inch events will we get, they don't do a very good job at that at all. And it's not a big surprise because they weren't designed to model thunderstorms. They're just designed to model general patterns. So they're just not up to that test. So we're kind of left with, we can do the numbers right up to yesterday, do those calculations and be pretty confident in that regard, but there's this future uncertainty. And we're actually got a NOAA study underway right now at the Water Survey to try to approach how we can quantify that uncertainty. So we will probably never be able to say, well, this is what the 100-year event's going to look like in 2020 or 2040, but what we might be able to say, here's what it is right now, and this is what it's probably going to be in the future, plus or minus 3% or something like that. We'll be able to come up with a number like that. So that's kind of where we stand. So right now we're kind of still stuck in place, but I think everybody's kind of aware that we need to update the numbers. So we're kind of all on the same page. It's just that finding the money is kind of what's the final thing that we got to get lined up at this point. So with that, I can answer any technical questions you have. Yes, Steve.
It's not technical.
Okay.
Have any neighboring states done an update like this recently?
They have. That's a good question. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, has done parts of the U.S. and it's kind of a patchwork quilt, and so they have. Let's see, I think they're doing one up in Michigan and Wisconsin right now. So it kind of, but our area, the one they did in 2004, they did that for kind of the Ohio River basin. So Indiana and Kentucky and maybe Missouri were also included in that one. So our area probably is not going to get revisited by them for a long, long time, because they're kind of facing the same problems of not that much funding at this point. So it will be a while before they come around again.
Jim, is there going to be an opportunity where a letter of support for your funding appeals would be helpful?
Probably so. I think there will come a point fairly soon where that would be beneficial to have some letters of support beyond the city of Chicago to help move this forward. So yes, that definitely would. And I could let you know when the timing's right on that. And we're not quite there yet, but hopefully soon.
On the NOAA map that you were referring to for Illinois, is that the same one? Was he talking about the one that we were looking at in our
So
packet?
what's in your packet this week is a recent post
Okay.
that
Yeah.
came from your office, maybe you personally.
Okay. Do you have commentary on that particular?
Yeah, so that one is, so that's the map that was
Yeah.
circulated around there. So
It's not so obvious.
it's, yeah. Most of those dark areas on there are areas where
Dry.
the newer NOAA atlas has lower numbers than our numbers. That's problematic if you're designing something and you kind of know that the trend is upward. How can you have a lower value at the 100-year mark? So
It did look like Champaign County was modeled as wetter, though.
that's right. Now, the story behind the story there is that when we did this study in the late 80s, for some reason Champaign-Urbana was kind of this low spot. And about 2 or 3 years after we did this study, they finally got the big rain that we were looking for to make the numbers higher. So we actually went back and kind of looked at that as a special case. And that is something, that does bring up an important point, that in these kinds of analysis, it's not a single storm that changes the whole landscape. You gotta have several big storms over time to make those numbers change. And it's just the way the techniques are developed are actually fairly conservative. So when you got 12 inches of rain tomorrow in Champaign-Urbana, that wouldn't necessarily change the 100-year value that much if you did the calculation. But if you had a series of heavy rain events over time, then that would start to move the goalpost quite a way. So at that point in time, Champaign-Urbana was kind of a low spot. If we redid those numbers again, that probably would go away in that regard.
So if we were just, today to take this as, this is our benchmark for right now, our design guide. So we have some delta values on there relative to Bulletin 70. Can you talk about the significance of those, the changes in values?
Yeah, so the colors here and the tans are, you drop, well, the kind of the beige there is close to zero, but as you get towards the darker browns there, it gets 1 to 2 inches below it. See, I think for around here, the 100-year event is estimated to be somewhere in the ballpark. I think it's about 7 inches or so. So being off by being different by 2 inches, that's a pretty big number. Half an inch, that's probably, there's kind of a range of uncertainty in these calculations, so that's probably within that range. But anything over about an inch or so, probably be pretty significant difference there. And of course, this is the 100-year, there's calculations done for the other time periods as well, but they're kind of all showing the same thing. The other thing, it's kind of unfortunate we call these, casually kind of say the 100-year storm, but it's not like it's on a calendar that, we're gonna, if we have one today, then when we got that 100 years before we see the next one. It's the key phrase is it's a 100-year return value on average, like if you look at the next 1,000 years, or last 1,000 years, how it will play out. So it really, it's probably a better way to express it, is though you have a 1% chance of it occurring in any given year. So that makes it more sensible that you could have 2 back-to-back events like that. And we've seen that happen several places.
Jim, do you take into account the effects of the flood? Say, 100 years ago, there was less built-up area and more natural area that would absorb or retain the water.
Yeah, well, that's certainly a problem we're seeing at the water survey research there, is that they're seeing increases in the runoff. But these are strictly rainfall, so and the technology for that is remaining relatively unchanged over time. So these are all pretty much from rain gauges, so it's just a bigger form of the rain gauge you might have in your backyard. The site we have here was up on campus until 1984, and then it's now on the corner of First and Windsor, but it's out in an open area. And we've got a number of these across the states. They're all very standardized in terms of their exposure and equipment and so forth, so that helps a lot.
Other questions or comments?
Okay.
Sure.
Is this the same data? I'm just curious if this is the same as the data used by FEMA in their 100-year floodplain calculations. or
Oh,
if there's
dear,
another
yeah,
set.
I think that's another set. I think they're looking at stream flows and some other records. But I know how this gets used is that it's usually fed into a hydrological model, and then it computes like the peak flow and stuff like that on the streams. That's how I understand. I mean, I'm not the engineer, so I don't know that part of it as well. But yeah, so it's usually you use this kind of data if you don't have any stream gauge records. So you're trying to estimate it using the model, so you're doing those calculations. But
So I actually missed the beginning, I'm sorry, I had to step out for a second, but the new data, is it just added to the previous data? So if there's a significant difference in the last 20 years compared to the original 80, is it only affecting a fifth of the total
Oh, okay,
data?
that's a
or is
good
it
question,
reflecting
yeah.
just the last 20 years?
yeah, so in that case, I mean, probably, yeah, so we've got about an extra 30 years or so of data now, and that's pushing the numbers up. And kind of like I was saying earlier, if you just have a couple of events or one or two events, it doesn't make that much difference. But now we've got 30 years of additional heavy rainfall events, so that could change that. So what we would probably do in this case is we wouldn't probably go back to bullet 70 and try to adjust it. We would just use all the data together now and look at it again in its entirety.
As a whole, as if the climate had been the same the whole 100 years.
That's right, that would be and then, yeah, so we'd look at that again on the whole, and then, I'm not sure, we haven't really thought this far ahead on how we would, if there'd be any adjustments that we'd make. You know, like I said earlier, the bullet 70 gave more weight to the second half of the record, but we might have some kind of, do some kind of approach like that again, is either put more weight to the second half, or maybe not use quite as much of the earlier data, say before the 1950s. That'd be another technique. But see, one thing is, what makes it kind of interesting is, you know, the early part of the record was dry. From about 1900 to about the 1950s, we had a series of droughts in Illinois, and look at all the numbers. It was just a drier period in Illinois history, and so it kind of went from a very dry period to now a very wet period. So which ones do you trust moving forward? So you're trying to hit the target that's moving at this point, so that makes it kind of tough.
So again, I think you covered this, but right now, the design standard is to use both NOAA or Bulletin 70 and go with the wetter?
In some cases, I think that kind of is a call by each municipality. So
Okay.
some of them, I think, and I think you can submit like permits to IDOT or whoever if you're working on those levels. I think you can make the case go with the wetter one, but that's the only choice you have. You can either use Bulletin 70 straight out, or you can pick the wetter one. So it's a pretty, not too many places to put. There don't have too many options except maybe your Champaign or Manus, right? Because you're trying to be the most conservative. That's what you're shooting for.
So the construction firm would like that one, the wetter one.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, we took a lot of heat because the newer stuff really jumped up from the really old records that we had before that, because they were very dry. So yeah, it depends on which side of the fence you're on, whether you want it wetter or drier, I guess.
All right. Do you have any other questions? Well, thank you so much for.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
coming in
And I'm available by email or phone call, so I think half you guys have my email, phone number, so feel free to give me a call or anything. And I'll be in touch with you when we get a little closer about letters of support.
Great.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll turn to Scott now for the staff report.
Sure. First, I have some updates on the action plan. We have a goal to influence new construction, to cultivate more green building certifications. And to that effect, the Community Development Department hosted a business and development luncheon, as they do on a regular basis, but the topic was Green Built Urbana. They had 3 speakers. I spoke about Energy Star certification and the Urbana-Champaign Energy Star Challenge. We had a speaker talk about Passive House, a speaker who's built his own Passive House, which you've probably seen in Washington. And we had a speaker, Hendrick House, speak about their LEED certified development on their property. So we had a really great audience to be talking about those topics. We also have a goal to evaluate bringing LEED ND language into our development codes. And so staff, public works staff and community development staff have both begun evaluating LEED ND and looking at what pieces of that standard we could bring into our subdivision code and our manual of practice. The manual of practice is sort of engineering level standards for developments, for subdivision developments. So it kind of sits below the subdivision code. Under our goal to engage with more on-site renewable energy in our market, we've evaluated a number of rooftop solar suitability tools like MapWell, and we found that a number of new tools that are very similar are coming out, some from universities, some from companies. And so we're making a recommendation to hold off on doing anything with that, because I think that sort of technique is going to continue to develop.
Holding off on spending money on it.
Correct.
Since it's available.
Right. In fact, Google just released such an analysis for several cities, so they have a little bit of market share in mapping, so I might wait on that. Moving on to the water management plan. We have a goal to engage with Mohammed Aquifer stakeholders, and so staff is participating in an advisory panel looking at challenges and best practices related to water supply management, specifically with the Mohammed Aquifer. Additionally, there is a consent agreement which is contained in your packet, which would see City of Urbana and its Mohammed Aquifer Coalition partners settle their lawsuit with the Clinton landfill. I've got the detail, a very quick summary in the staff report. Attached to your packet, I also have the mayor's memo and the consent agreement in its entirety. The Urbana City Council voted to move it to council, which turned out to be tonight since yesterday was a holiday. So they're expected to vote on that tonight. Related to that, the governor signed a piece of legislation just recently that prohibits the disposal of manufactured gas plant waste at any landfill except hazardous waste landfill. So essentially upgrading the requirements for disposing of that type of waste. We had a goal in our plan, our water plan, to evaluate household hazardous waste collection. In the past, we've been reliant on every few years getting funds from the state to hold a one-day event. And it ends up being about $100,000 that the state spends in a one-day event to dispose of hazardous waste. So there's a lot of it out there. The county has, or the Regional Planning Commission has finished a study and is now turning that study into a best practices toolkit. And so I've attached the last phase of that study. Susan Monti is overseeing that project, and it may be good to have her come and speak about the next phases. But in brief, she has indicated that the next piece of work is the form an advisory group to guide the development of a permanent household hazardous waste facility that could serve the region, East Central Illinois region. A note on youth cycle activities from Sweet Corn Festival. They collected 450 pounds of recyclables, as well as 25 yards of cardboard from the festival. So nice waste diversion there. Our next meeting, our regular scheduled meeting, would be October 6th.
I have a question. On the, I'm hoping you know, on the consent decree, it talks about the requirement to add 12 inches of soil.
Correct.
Everything has a date except that. Do you know why that one doesn't have a deadline?
I think the language is constructed to mean from here, from the time that the consent agreement is signed in perpetuity for that particular location.
It just says
Yeah.
that they will do it. It doesn't say when they will do it.
They're gonna do it when they pile more garbage on top,
Right.
whenever that's,
Okay.
yeah, because they're only using like 2% of the landfill because they stopped taking.
Yeah, they have to cover the landfill every evening. Anything they add, they have to cover it the same day. Was that your question?
Well, it says that this particular part is covered. The MGP source material is already covered. Intermediate cover is probably the same day thing. And then that this agreement says that they will add an additional 12 inches of compacted clay like a liner.
That's right, to separate the two.
And then above that they can add other waste. Also, it has a typo. A resolution for Urbana, so I thought you might like to know that. The spelling of aquifer at the beginning. It's like,
I'll pass that on.
You're right.
You know, this budget cutback, so the city had to get rid of its copy editor.
it's correct everywhere else. I'm surprised they didn't catch that.
We do not have a copy.
Okay, yes.
It's aqua.
Scott, I just have a question about the Sweet Corn Fest. Are they able to, do the recyclables include composting this year? Do they do any composting of the corn?
So for several years, we've been collecting separated corn cobs for composting. In previous years, the loads have been contaminated, and we haven't been able to, in fact, compost them at the landscape recycling center. This year, there was a miscommunication or a logistics problem, and that load was sent to the transfer station to the landfill. So we haven't yet actually composted our organics collection from the Sweet Corn.
But the effort's there.
Yes, we had extra effort this year to ensure clean load, so I think we've figured out that piece.
How did that work out?
Volunteers with gloves.
Okay. Picking up.
Yeah, when need be. We also had a lot of volunteers who were just on hand, like directing people where to put what.
I noticed that. I thought that was nice. It was it was a visual. It was, it was like you could tell that these people were kind of helping to direct traffic.
Yeah.
I like their shirts.
There were good shirts.
They were
Credit to Courtney Kwong, our recycling coordinator.
Any other questions or comments for Scott? All right, we don't have any continuing business this evening, so we can move on to our new business, the Determination of Sustainability Advisory Commission role and Grove Solar Technical Assistance.
Did you have a PowerPoint?
I do, yeah.
Kind of.
Yes.
You can sit here, or you can. This is also a mobile piece.
Yeah, you mind if I take it?
Yeah, no problem.
Well, good evening. My name is Marcia Lockman, and thanks for having us this evening. So there's a team of us here that each of us will speak just a little bit to you tonight and go over this program with you. Let's see. Under slideshow. I told you I can't see anymore. There you go. I just got new content. I can't see close up or far away. I'm in a very bad stage of my development right now. So, thank you. So I actually. No operation of heavy equipment. Yeah, that's right. My role, I have been working with the Illinois Green Economy Network, and Bart, I just connected who you were when I saw you. I knew that person I walked in. So it's a consortium of community colleges in Illinois, and we were fortunate enough to partner with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association and the Environmental Law and Policy Center and some other partners across Wisconsin and Illinois and Minnesota to be awarded a Department of Energy Sunshot Grant. And so that Sunshot Grant was to look at sort of the soft side of solar, to look at providing technical assistance to municipalities across 3 different states. And so Peter, who's with us tonight, is with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. All 3 of us drove in the rain, no matter where we came from today. Midwest Renewable Energy Association, he'll tell you more about that, covers multiple states in the Midwest, but this grant really focused on those 3 states. And so this team here, Sarah, and there's another partner too, has been looking at the Illinois participants for this grant. And there was a process whereby we solicited applications, and municipalities responded seeking interest in this technical assistance. So what I'm going to do is just tell you a little bit about that process, and then each of us will tell you a little bit about why we're here and how we got here. So the Sunshot program, the Department of Energy has many programs in energy efficiency, renewable energy, many different divisions. And the Sunshot program is focused on, this particular piece of it is focused on rooftop solar. And again, looking at sort of the soft side of solar. So this funding cannot pay for the bricks and mortar, the panels themselves on a roof anywhere. It can pay for anything that leads up to that. So if you look across the 3 states that we're working in, there's a great deal of disparity among municipalities on that expertise. So what this grant does is sharing information between the states and where the best practices have been and being able to replicate those. So the goal then is to reduce the cost of solar by providing technical assistance to municipalities. So that's one of the reasons that we're here tonight. So it's probably obvious, but there's more than just putting the panels on a roof. There are all these different pieces that go into a system. And so what we can provide in this grant is some of those pieces. So when we sent out applications and asked municipalities, again, it was across Illinois, that's what this group is focused on, and we had, I don't remember the exact number now, but we had representation from the entire state. And so there are several in Chicago who were interested, several downstate, and then we were really impressed with the application that Scott submitted. It was clear that Urbana is well on its way to understanding the needs that it has and also the opportunity. And so most of the municipalities that we're working with, there's one particular piece that they were interested in moving forward, and Scott had a long list, and so we were really excited about that. So the pieces that the technical assistance is providing for Urbana is to look at a solar roadmap, and so you all had already begun that process. Scott had begun that process with Department of Energy actually already, and so there's a gentleman named Brian Ross who is out of Minnesota who has a lot of experience in solar roadmaps, and so he's actually looking at Urbana's solar roadmap right now. We'll complete that, and then we'll add that to the Department of Energy's solar roadmap inventory. So that piece is well underway. The other thing that Brian is helping us do is looking at the permitting and planning and zoning, those things that you already have in place. Where can there be things added? How can it be tweaked? And again, Scott had that well put together. And so Brian Rostak, the technical expert from Minnesota, who this is what he does all the time, he's right now they've already had some exchange, I suppose, and we'll be finishing that up. And then the third and fourth pieces. The third piece is to look at rooftop solar on municipal buildings. So again, we've been able to look and see kind of where some of the need is, and we can help prepare an RFP that then would go out to bid and could go through that process. So that's something else that the technical assistants can provide. So helping prepare the RFP, and so that's one piece that we're still working on. And then the fourth piece, which I really want to focus on this evening, that is this residential bulk solar. And so helping to kick off that process, manage that process. Also, and Sarah's going to talk to you about this, but there's a sort of unique opportunity right now in the state of Illinois based on the Illinois Power Authority, and so, which is sort of why there's a timeliness to this effort, and so we'll be able to walk through that with you tonight. So at that point, now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. So Sarah Wilkes is with the Environmental Law and Policy Center out of Chicago, and I can click for you if you want to.
Yeah, you can click for me.
Okay.
Marcia, before you hand off, I wonder, is the process for, or the time period for other municipalities applying, is that time period passed, or is
It has.
it has? Okay.
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, we have unfortunately a limited time with the grant, so we had to get that going.
Yep.
We had, and Marcia didn't mention though, we had great response, so we're working with not only Urbana, but we're working with some wastewater treatment facilities throughout the state, as well as Will County, Madison County, and hopefully a couple other Chicago suburban communities. So I think it's gonna be good, and we have good geography. So as Marcia said, I'm Sarah. I work for the Environmental Law and Policy Center, and I don't know if all of you know ELPC, but we're a Chicago-based regional organization. I spend a lot of my time working on policies that will help solar, and in addition to being on this kind of Illinois group, me and my colleague Brad are responsible overall for implementing interconnection and net metering standards in all of our states as well. So we're well on the way on that process, and actually Illinois, we're hopeful to get some good rulings out of the Commerce Commission soon on those issues. But nonetheless, last year we embarked on a journey. I'll call it a journey because we learned a lot from it. With the City of Chicago and World Wildlife Fund and Vote Solar, which is a national solar advocacy group, to do the first bulk purchase in Illinois. And what the bulk purchase really means is that we are grouping together to get a discount on solar. There's lots of different ways to do it. And the way that the City of Chicago chose to do it was that instead of grouping people together and then going out to bid, they would go out to bid for the best price that they could get, and then get people to sign up so that they already have the price in hand. And they thought that was more attractive because then it can sometimes take a long time to get enough people grouped to go out to bid, and people sometimes don't want to sign up if they don't know what the price is going to be to begin with. And so the deal was that we would do the outreach and customer acquisition in response to a good price based off of what we thought were regional prices on solar. It was definitely a learning experience. It was obviously a very large geography, very populous geography, but very new to solar, as is most of the state of Illinois. And we had far more people interested than we thought would be interested, but we had a lot of complications along the way. And we did not have this unique opportunity that Marcia noted to help us. So, but I think it was a great experience. Ultimately, we ended up with over 400 kilowatts of solar installed in the Chicagoland area, which is well over 100 systems, and did a lot of outreach and a lot of education. And as a result, a lot of other communities have come to me and to Vote Solar and others and said, that's a great idea. We'd like to do it as well in our community. And Scott actually was one of those people. He, maybe 2 years ago, said, hey, that's a good idea. We want to do that. And this just happens to be the kind of unique opportunity for that. So let's do the next, well, do you want to talk about Milwaukee?
Sure,
Okay.
I can talk briefly about Milwaukee. My name is Peter Murphy. I work for the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. I'm a market development coordinator. And MREA started doing these group purchasing programs in a similar way to Chicago. And we started doing it in 2013. And we focus really on neighborhoods. So we've done this 5 times now. Basically every 6 to 12 months we focus on a different neighborhood. So we, rather than going with the large geography of Chicagoland or Chicago, we focus on like a zip code, you know. So it's much more focused, and we see, as we'll get to a slide that goes over numbers, but we see a lot smaller numbers, but it's a lot more manageable for us. But you know.
So as you can see, like the concept is to make solar a bit more, not only just affordable, but more understandable. So right now, if you want to get solar on your roof, you'd probably Google solar Urbana, right? And you would try to figure out all the companies that might offer you solar in the area. They have different prices. You'd have to schedule some sort of evaluation of maybe you can do it online, maybe you can't. You don't know all the information that you're getting from those folks. So the idea here is that you are limiting, or you're reducing all these market barriers by having one point of contact, one price, or one base price, offered to anybody that wants it in the area, and that there are outreach partners they're doing the outreach that takes away that customer acquisition cost. So there's trusted partners like the City of Urbana, the City of Champaign, the university, ELPC, Sierra Club, other folks that are putting out this information so you can say, oh, well, I trust them. I'm going to go check it out. Next slide. Okay, so this again is just kind of the barriers that we're addressing in this process. First, the high upfront costs. Customer acquisition is actually a very high piece of the per watt cost of residential solar. The Chicago process that we found, the installers that won the contract, they had approximately before the Chicago program a $1,200 per system customer acquisition cost, and through this process they were able to lower that to $250. So that savings that we're doing for them by getting the customers is passed on to the customers.
Did you say 1,200 to 250?
Mm-hmm.
So that involves, I was just curious what that involves on the contractor's part.
Well, so we give them the customers. What they then have to do is obviously engineer the system, do any of the sort of structural engineering that you might have to do, go through the permitting process at the city, and then obviously install it. So the cost of the system isn't $250, the customer acquisition cost. Because some people still drop out, you know, they sign up, you go through the whole proposal process with them, they still drop out. So there's still a cost associated with that person, but it's not like they had to go out to your neighborhood.
So maybe they had a 1 in 50 acquisition rate before, and they stood on 50
Yes.
different roofs and got one person to actually buy, and
That's right.
that cost $1,200.
That's right. That's right. So the second one obviously is the customer confusion. This is one that we already talked about. You're giving essentially customers a package, and they still don't have to take it if they don't want it, but it removes some of the confusion. Particularly on the outreach, when people come to an information session, then they get all the information up front and they can sign up on the spot, and the installer is there to even do an initial review of their roof right there on the spot. That removes so much confusion, because you learn all the ins and outs, what all the different terminology means, what all the incentives are. It is a very effective way of getting people, the people that want to do it in the door. And same with the process complexity. Again, you're walking people through it, and so there's no questions at the end of it. Okay, so what can we expect? Let me put this very, very clearly that these are examples. This is not the price that we are necessarily going to get. But solar is measured in a cost per watt. Most residential systems are in the kilowatt, well, all residential systems are going to be in the kilowatt range, somewhere between 3 and maybe 8 kilowatts. So you have to multiply everything by 1,000, because there's 1,000 watts in a kilowatt. So if the price was $4 a watt, and again, I don't know exactly what the price right now average of an install in Urbana would be, but we would figure that out before going out. And we got a 30% discount from the installer right out. So because of our going out and getting the customers. That reduces the price. There's a federal incentive that reduces the price. And then there's this unique opportunity they have right now called an SREC market. So everybody knows, or maybe everybody doesn't, renewable energy credits. You guys have talked about these ad nauseum. Okay. Every system that, as soon as you produce power, produces renewable energy credits. And the Illinois Power Agency just started purchasing renewable energy credits from solar rooftop systems. They did their first purchase in June. It was fully subscribed. The next one is in November. And the last one is in March. It makes, the sale of the SRECs makes the system even more affordable to more people. It is a 5-year contract for the SRECs, and it either goes to you if you're the owner of the system, or it goes to the solar company if they are going to own the system and offer you a different type of financing model, which I'll get to in just a second. And what we would like to do within the city of Urbana is have the installer sell those SRECs on behalf of residents that sign up to reduce the price to folks. And what they can do is they can bid in the SRECs that they think that they can sell through the systems that we find before we even find the system. So essentially what we're asking them to do is say, we're going to take the risk of putting a deposit down on being able to deliver these SRECs over the next year from X number of systems, and we would go and do the outreach to find people to sign up, and then they would install them and sell the SRECs. So, and that can be a significant reduction in the price of a system. The auction that just went on in June, I rounded because it's easier for the math, but it was $168 an SREC for residential sized systems. And that's pretty significant. It's going to help you with the payback. So you can see how this affects just the affordability of solar in the area. So that's on a direct purchase. The same applies on a power purchase agreement or a lease option. And a power purchase agreement we don't have them here really in Illinois yet. And that's because most of the smaller installers that are here don't offer that type of financing, but it is the mechanism by which most solar markets throughout the nation have scaled. And because it is no money down, you pay for the output of the solar system as opposed to the actual equipment. So the system is owned by the solar company, and I will use an example, Solar City, they're the largest solar installer in the nation in residential. They would still own the system. They would do all the maintenance on the system. So they would sell the SRECs and own the SRECs moving forward after the initial sale is done. And you would buy all of the kilowatt hours coming off of the system for a term, usually 15 to 25 years, depending on what they offer. If you move, it goes to the next homeowner. If you're in your house forever, then you're in your house forever. And the only way it works is if that kilowatt hour price is less than what you pay for electricity right now. And they're not able to offer that unless they sell those SRECs and get the federal ITC and all sorts of stuff. But either way, the idea is that we want to get beyond the kind of true believers, the first adopters, to people that will do this because there's also a financial incentive. Because I'm guessing that a lot of the kind of true believers have already done it. So this is not what we can expect to see necessarily. It's just an example of what we can expect to see. And we would ask for this type of pricing from anybody that answers our RFP. Okay, next. Okay, so what have we seen in other areas? This is just an example of obviously 6 different ones. The Wisconsin one that Peter talked about is on the bottom. And Illinois, the Chicago one is the second from the last. We essentially have to determine what we think we can sell. And sell is not hard and fast because we're not on the hook for anything. We're just on the hook for disseminating information. There's no monetary hook for the city of Urbana. There's no monetary hook for us. The monetary hook is for the person that answers the RFP. They're taking the risk of pre-selling those SRECs if we take the risk of trying to find customers that will install systems. So essentially what we want to do is think about what kind of scope we want the installers to be able to provide. 2,100 people in the greater Chicagoland area signed up. In Colorado, that was they have a much more mature market. They had 1,700 people sign up. And about 10% of people that sign up move on with their systems. In Illinois, it was a little bit different because there was a story in the Tribune and tons of people signed up that were not eligible. And really, to be eligible, you need to be a homeowner or to have your roof rights. If you're a renter, this does not apply to you. And a lot of people that were renters were like, I want solar, and it just, unfortunately, they had to be cut right across the top. Eventually we'll get there, but this really is only for homeowners or people that have roof rights.
So you mean like a single-family home, or like if they could convince their landlord, the landlord could register?
Yes, or you gotta be, yes, if you're a condo owner and you wanna do it, you have to be, your condo association has to say, yes, you can do that on top of the, yes. So
Oh.
single-family homes or people
Alright.
with,
So the barrier was just that it wasn't the property owner, not the
That's
fact that
right.
it was multifamily?
that's right, no, multifamily is not that, yeah, that's right. Additionally, in this particular case, we only did residential in Chicago, and I think in the Milwaukee ones, would you only do residential?
It was primarily residential. We do have a couple commercial installs.
But that actually is not a limitation with the proposed Urbana program, because the system just has to be of a certain size, up to 25 kilowatts, and that could meet some small commercial businesses' goals as well. So it could be actually easier for us to hit a certain kilowatt capacity.
So like a small owner-occupied business could be in scope.
Yep.
Does it have to be rooftop? Are these all rooftop installs? Or
So technically, to participate in the SRAC auction, they don't care where it's located as long as it's hooked in behind your meter. Sunshot really is about rooftop solar, but we're not going to turn people away if it ends up that they could do a better ground mount system. I think we shoot for rooftop, but if ground mount ends up being better, then
Okay. It's clearly on site, it's not down the road.
it has to be behind your meter.
Yeah, okay.
So, it has to go into your inverter, into your meter, and then back out to the grid if you're not using it.
Okay.
But it also must be under 25 kilowatts to kind of participate in this particular grouping. So you can see that the discount that is pretty consistent, that people, when suppliers installers are answering this RFP, we're getting like a 30% discount on average for most of these programs. And 30% is a big deal when you're installing solar, because every incremental cost that you can reduce or take away, you're just improving the payback that people get on that investment, or improving the power purchase agreement price that they're paying, and that just brings more people in the door. So we'll talk about goals for this group a little bit later. Here's the crunch. It's a little bit of a time crunch. The next SREC sale that the IPA will do is going to be in November. That means we would have to put out our RFP, get responses, choose a supplier or an installer, finalize the contract with the installer in time for that installer to speculatively bid in to this SREC auction. It's not impossible. When the city of Chicago did theirs, they went from concept to finalizing their contract within 2 months. And we're already well past concept, ready to move on to the other stages. So that should not be a real barrier, but it is, we can't spend a lot of time making decisions. Then the outreach is the most critical piece of this, because this is how we get the word out that this project is available. And we would lean very heavily on members of the community that are trusted sources. So the university hosts Solar Social, where they learn a lunch and learn. City of Urbana hosts a lunch and learn, where people, they're sending the email blast, hey, come learn about this opportunity. Then the installer, somebody from MREA or ELPC or iGen is there to also provide support. And you sign up people that are interested in getting their house evaluated. The more you do those types of sessions, the more effective we become. And the most effective ones that we did were ones where it was a local kind of community group. The alderman is hosting one. People love to go to things that their alderman is hosting. And or group events as well. We have to put like a time window on it though. The installer will have 6 months to identify all the systems that are going to sell these SRACs. I think we want to shorten that even more into, we want to be able to identify all those systems within 3 months. That gives us a very manageable window. It also allows people to not have to sit and think if they're gonna decide to put solar on the roof, they need to decide to put solar on the roof.
So, I'm right behind you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead first.
For the program that's being proposed for Urbana, does the ownership of the equipment go to the resident, or is it, as you were describing before, under a PPA, is it more like that kind of a model?
We would ask the installer to provide both options. So
Okay.
that if you wanted to directly purchase it, you could, but
Mhm.
that limits a lot of participants. So if you didn't want to, you could do a PPA.
So any individual would have the option of either.
That's what
owning
we
or
would
not?
hope, but we can't.
Okay, but you can't tell.
I can't tell exactly what people are gonna
Okay,
answer on the
RFP.
RFP. We asked for that in Chicago, and they were not able to offer us a power purchase agreement
Okay.
option. So that did limit participation. When people realized that they were still gonna put some money down, then a lot of people dropped out as well.
Okay, and then is that also the case with whatever SRECs might be associated with the purchase? It would,
So essentially, because the installer is bidding in those SRECs to
okay.
the
So
sale.
that's gonna go to the
that-
installer?
Yes, the installer, you've given the authority to the installer to sell those SRECs. It's a 5-year contract, so the
Okay.
first 5 years of the system. After
Just-
that, it depends on whether you own the system or they own the system. So after 5 years, we can negotiate that. This is all negotiable with the installer. If you want them to resell it after those 5 years somewhere else, so be it. If you want to hold on to them, so be it. If they own the system, they get to do what they want with it.
Did you have that SREC sale in the Chicago scenario as well?
No,
So that's a little bit different.
different. So we sold, there used to be a rebate program. Actually, technically, still is a rebate program in the state of Illinois. It's a lottery system. It's confusing. The money's stolen all the time. I don't think we can guarantee that that rebate system is going to be in place this year, but this SREC process kind of replaces that and actually ends up being pretty good. So maybe we'll have a rebate to make it even better, but I just don't want to put it in there as a guarantee. A lot of people thought they were going to get the rebate in Chicago, and also they froze all of the contracts. It was terrible. I don't want to do business with the state anymore. It was terrible. So,
Okay, question.
yes,
You said that there's an auction in November and another one in March.
right.
And that we would need to get this done by November and then try and get all the folks signed
Yes.
up by February.
Yes.
Which is when nobody's here, in my opinion.
Well,
You know, on
that's-
campus, nobody's here. So is there an option for the second, like to go for March, or is November the only option?
So
Because we
there's
can
no
still
guaran-
make it happen, let's make it
Yeah.
happen either way.
there's no guarantee that you win in November, right? So the installer has to bid into an actual auction. If they win, then we have 6 months to sign people up.
Okay.
But we would want to tighten that just so that we give ourselves, we don't let people sit too long, right? If they don't win, we would ask them to bid into the March auction again, and then our timeline, it just moves back quite a bit.
And the 168 or 175, that number is what it happened to be at the last
Yes.
auction.
So, yes, so technically, all we're gonna ask of the installer is, what is your per watt price for any system that's installed? And they're gonna say, we can give you $3 a watt, base price. And we'll say, we'll have to evaluate all of the prices that come in. If they decide that they wanna bid in the SRECs at $1,000, and they think they can win it and then provide us this $3 watt price, we shouldn't care, truthfully, because
Because that's on them.
that's on them, that's right. That's on them. They're putting down, they have to put down a deposit to even make this type of bid. If they don't win it, well, they'll get the deposit back, but if we can't sell it, then they'll lose their deposit.
And do the price, is the price per watt dependent on different types of installation? Like if you have a very flat roof or a very steep roof and all
Yes,
that
and that's
stuff?
part of the RFP as well. So it's a base price for any system up to 25 kW usually on a pitched roof. So then what we'll ask them to fill out as well is an addendum that says,
That'll be acceptable.
here's some additional prices. And now you cannot ever go above anything that you don't fill out in the addendum from day one, essentially. So they can't say, we're just kidding, we need to add another 50 cents on now because of X. Too bad. You already, once you sign the contract, you sign the contract. But they might say like, oh, you know what, you have like a metal roof. That's harder for us to install, I mean, very few people have that, but you know, you have that's hard for us to install, that's gonna increase the price by 10 cents a watt. Or you need a new electrical box because your house is really old, that's a flat $350 fee. Those are the types of things that are all pre-negotiated so that the homeowner does not have to negotiate anything. They would just get a proposal that says, here's your base price, here are the things that really add no profit value to the company that's doing the installing. It's just things that might change the base price, or the final price, rather. So they bid in November. If they win, we do the outreach. If they lose, we wait until March. If we do such a great job that we actually find more people that want to participate than the amount that we collectively bid into the November auction, we can ask the installer to bid those people into the March auction. So, okay,
Could I just ask one quick
Yeah.
question that was on the previous slide, 3 slides back, which was the dot there, that one,
oops.
the table. So there was going from 9,800 down to 40. I was just trying to write down what the numbers were there, because it's 175 per kilowatt hour produced, right?
Yeah,
That
so
scenario.
assume that every kilowatt produces about 1.2 megawatt hours a year. So 1.2 times 5, because it's a 5-year contract. So every kilowatt produces 6 SRECs. So then multiply that by, you know, I think we did a 5 kilowatt system here. And
I was just wondering if that complicates things compared to the Chicago scenario, or in your experience, is
in my experience, most people, the more complicating factor was having to explain to people afterwards that there's this thing called an SREC auction that they could possibly sell their SRECs into. This being all pre-negotiated with the installer makes it a lot easier for people.
Your other table showed, you know, everybody 30% discount, 30% discount. This is many more discounts.
Yes, so
Okay.
I would expect that this would be, that now the customer acquisition cost plus the SREC would get us a much bigger discount.
because right? So I mean, in parentheses next to that SREC, it's really, I mean, thinking about the percentage discounts. I mean, that's something like a $5,000 out of $20,000 original, so it's
25%.
sort of 25% kind of number.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is a big,
Yes.
a good chunk.
Yep. Yeah, if we only got 30% off, I would say you're taking advantage of only the investment tax credit and you're giving us a bad deal.
Mhm.
And here's the crux of it. And you don't have to choose anyone. Well, actually, let's step back a second. The contract holder with the installer, it would be Midwest Renewable Energy Association. They send out the RFP, they negotiate with the contractor. Our only job is to, collectively, is to say, this is a good idea, and to help with the outreach in advertising the program. And if we, and to review the responses that come back from the people that answer the RFP, and if the responses come back and they're terrible, we all walk away. We don't have to do anything. But if it comes in that we're gonna get a 50% discount on what the average install prices of solar in Urbana otherwise would be, or what have you, that's a good offer to advertise to people. People make their own decision. Even when they sign up on the website, that doesn't mean they're signing a contract. That means they want to get a proposal from the installer and they can decide to walk away anyway. We won't pressure them. This installer can't pressure them. It is just a simplification and price reduction process.
Can you talk about the federal tax credit is income, so that's like the homeowner, right?
Or the solar company.
Okay, and so, or the solar company. So if it's on a business, does that still apply in a different way, or, okay?
Income, it applies universally to anybody that has a tax appetite. So
Okay,
if
okay.
it's on a nonprofit, then what I would say is that the nonprofit does not want to own the system because then they can't take advantage of
Right.
that.
Right,
Or a government building. You would want the installer to still own it and offer you the PPA.
So a church or a government building.
Mhm. Yes. For a homeowner, again, that's their decision. Generally speaking, you get a better deal if you just purchase it because then they have to build in the solar installer, when they offer a PPA, has to build in their profit over a longer period of time, and the time value of money means that you can see, you just lose a little bit more money or you save a little bit less money, I should say, if you do a PPA. But you would have to have the money to put down up front, and a lot of people don't have that. So there are pros and cons of both. Hopefully we'll get the bids back that have both options, and the installer can walk people through the pros and cons of all those, or we can in our presentations. But yeah, the tax credit is a really big thing. It's 30% that like none of us want to leave on the table.
And you might know this, but right now it sunsets December 2016, that
Yes.
tax credit does, and we
We have
don't
to have
know.
it's installed, flipped on 2016.
And so I don't know if there's any hope that that's gonna extend.
And it goes down to 10% after that, but only for business, not for residential.
Okay.
So it's, the time window on this is quite right, with all these things lining up.
So again, from the company's point of view, this is really all about having qualified customers, not having to do the customer acquisition.
That's right.
That's what's in it for them.
Yep.
And for the federal taxpayer, it's advancing the solar market, or broader policy.
That's right.
And for Urbana residents, it's cheap solar.
That's right.
Is there an upper limit to how many systems can be installed, so we have a landslide of, interested folks?
40,000.
Or what's our roadmap thinking? I mean, that's another question, right? Do we have ideas on that?
The roadmap doesn't have a particular installed goal for this, but we've talked about it, installed goals, and that's something we can talk about right now. There are some thresholds. There's a minimum threshold of 80 kilowatts. I'm going to describe it.
Sure. So this process where you can sell SRECs, there is a minimum bid size, and it comes out to 80 kilowatts total capacity. And that, if you're dividing that by 5 kilowatt systems, which is residential, that's about 16 systems. So that's the minimum that we would have to commit to trying to get customers for. The other thing and then our upper limit is whatever we decide that we want our upper limit to be. If we think that more than 16 people are going to sign up for this, I would say that we increase that goal, because putting that 3-month time limit on is good, because if necessary, we have another 3 months that we could expand outreach if there's not enough in the Champaign-Urbana. The installer itself could go and see if there's another installer maybe in Chicago that could find that, and they could work out a deal that way. But obviously we do our best to fill it out here.
Not that there's that many households with solar already installed, but if somebody just wanted to add to an existing array, would they still be eligible to participate?
Yeah.
So you were gonna go through the expectations for us. Did you have a slide about that?
Yes. So this is the timeline, and again, it's kind of it's the previous slide, but actually go back for a second because the stuff is on the bottom. So you can see, or maybe not see, there's some expectations next to each one of these groups of tasks. So and this group is kind of informally called the advisory committee, right? Where the advisory committee really comes in is helping with the marketing and outreach. In addition to kind of thinking through this whole program, asking questions, thinking about things that we haven't thought about, it's really about helping with the marketing and outreach. So I don't know if you want to say what the City of Urbana has agreed to do, but
Sure. So we're going to be organizing this advisory group to evaluate the bid documents and also plan some outreach, and we're going to be doing outreach ourselves directly. That's kind of our big role in terms of this particular piece of the Grove Solar project.
right. So we would hope to get, in addition to Urbana, to get Champaign County or the Regional Planning Commission or the university to also be an informal partner on this, outreach partner on this, and do the types of kind of events that I was describing. Communication is really the key to success. The more emails you get about it from people that you trust, the more lunch and learn or after work kind of learning opportunities that we provide to people, the more likely we are to be successful. And that is all of the staffing of those events is provided in the technical assistance that we are
So you may all remember that I've described our public engagement with the commercial side, the Energy Star Challenge, in that basically everyone who signed up was specifically spoken to by myself or one of the other program partners. What Peter and Sarah have described in their experience in previous sales is similar. Almost all the people who end up signing a contract went to one of these small group meetings, a neighborhood meeting, a meeting hosted by an alderman, where they learned about the program face to face.
Yeah. And even more, almost more importantly, they see the installer, right? It's not a talking head on the phone. You see this local installer. If it's a national company that wins the RFP, they're gonna have somebody local to do all the work. It'd be that local person that's gonna do the site evaluation, that's gonna, can look on their iPad right at that meeting and say, sorry, you have 3 trees that shade your roof, you are not qualified. Or you have only a north-facing roof, you are not qualified. You know, but, or can say, look, we could, you know, just by looking, I can fit about a 3 kilowatt system, but we'd like to schedule your site assessment. And people can think about that right there on the spot, and it's helpful for people to, you know, to engage right away.
Is there, as far as doing some of these outreach events, is there any limitation on what sorts of organizations could sponsor them, or just like anybody?
Anybody.
Who want to do that?
More the merrier.
So
We,
there's a few in
we
town that
literally
would be-
got, we went to every book club, we went to every chamber of commerce, we went to every neighborhood group, every alderman. We asked, we had Sierra Club host something, we had Citizens Utility Board host something, we had as many, we had cities, whatever, counties, whatever, we had as many people as possible host something. Again, because you hit the most number of people.
Additionally, some of you are not from the city of Urbana who are here, and we invited more people from outside the city of Urbana because we've chosen to make the geographic scope of this program Champaign County. So unincorporated Champaign County and all the municipalities, we're going to open the opportunity to purchase to all of them. So we want to engage people from other cities to also help out with the public engagement to get their trusted speakers and community partners to host events and communicate the opportunity to their residents.
I have one other question about the, if I was an installer and selling it, bidding on the SRECs, if I'm an installer and let's say there are 2 or 3 local firms and maybe there's 3 or 4 national firms or something, that the stuff about the SREC bid, so it costs money to make a bid on the SREC. So if I
You're
was
essentially putting down a bid deposit for every SREC that you think you're going to sell. And you're in it, because they are selling the SREC speculatively, like they have not identified the systems first, it's a little bit higher bid deposit. So that risk is on the installer that wins the RFP. What we're going to do is, what we're saying is, in exchange for you putting down that bid deposit and taking that risk, and you reducing the price, we're going to do the customer acquisition for you.
Right, I'm just imagining, or maybe we can clarify some a little bit more some other time, but I'm just trying to imagine if I was a local, nice, friendly installer, are they putting their neck out really far by bidding on this?
So it depends. Generally, so there was already one that happened in June, and a lot of the local people went through a national person that took the bid risk for them, and it's just the financing arm.
Right.
So they had to just share a little bit of that SREC price with the national player then.
The SREC's a national market and they could...
And well, the national player was just a national company that has the kind of capital that they can put down and several tens of $1,000s of bid deposit, right? And that's, truthfully, we shouldn't care. That's not, whether they have the capital to put down that bid deposit on their own or they need to go to a third party, as long as they can provide us with a good price, with obviously good service, we feel like they're going to do a good job. Their kind of financial arrangement is their own financial.
Sure, but I mean, we still care because we want to support our local businesses.
Absolutely. And I should say that even the folks that won the Chicago one were 2 local solar installers. But even the solar installers don't usually do the actual boots on the roof. They hire the local electrician to do that. So I would think that even if a national player like Solar City or something won this bid, they have to contract locally, because they're not gonna import people into Champaign-Urbana to do this, right? They're gonna go to whomever the local installer is and say, do you wanna do it? And we would very much at the front end and putting out the RFP say, we encourage you to work together. We wanna, you know, the more, you know, and if that's something that we wanna evaluate bids on, local kind of, you know, participation, we should do that.
And then one other quick question about the selling the SREC. So it's a 5-year sale. I've spoken to several people in town that are really adamant that they never want to sell their SREC because they feel like they want to own the fact that their solar is theirs. So that could be a slight sticking point for just a couple diehard people, but maybe those people have already bought solar, so maybe it's not a big deal. But after this 5-year period, would one argument be that they would then own it after that 5-year period, unless they want to sell it?
Again, it kind of determines what type of financing situation you take. If you're doing the power purchase agreement option, the system owner is, the solar company is always the system owner and they have the right to the SRECs. Right. If you own your system and after 5 years you say, now I want to keep them so I can say that this is solar energy, it's up to you.
Okay, because I think that might be a nice point to make if someone had an issue with that.
That's based on the theory that somebody else has the RECs, you might as well have coal power. You might as well have grid power.
Well, I mean, think about it this way though.
I mean, you've got it on the roof, but.
You're selling these essentially to, I totally get that point. You're selling these, you specifically may not be able to say you're getting 100%, but your utility is getting the same amount of power that you're putting on, you know.
Absolutely.
So.
No,
It doesn't leave the state.
It doesn't leave the state and it doesn't.
Still local.
It's still local and truthfully, it is what it is and it's the mechanism by which we're gonna get a lot more solar on.
It's a lot more incremental than buying a RECs, mostly we can say that.
Right.
I mean, as a customer.
Yeah.
Roughly reducing capacity.
We could buy our own.
Did you have any churches in the Chicago scenario?
We did not because we only offered it to residential.
No commercial?
Yeah, no commercial.
So we're going to see if you worked at all with Faith in Place or Brian Tower if they were anything.
Yeah, Brian actually did, they did an email blast for us. They did not host an event because the time crunch was a little too much. It was also during summer, which is honestly a horrible time. Even though the sun's out, it's a horrible time to get people to go to things. So, at least if it's maybe in February, people don't have anything else to do.
Buy the summer for your Christmas presents.
But the local role, the big local role is setting up all of those FaceTime events where we can communicate the opportunity to as many people in person as possible. Website doesn't sell it.
I believe there are many students on campus who would love to arrange some events through their clubs and groups, but they don't know a lot of people locally, and so I'm thinking from the university perspective, it might be best to go through some of the university systems, like a faculty meeting.
That's what I would hope, is that would be ideal. Truthfully, if City of Urbana said, hey, employees, you live in the Champaign-Urbana area, here's an opportunity we just wanted to alert you from. We're going to host a meeting where you can learn more. Same with the university. Maybe it's a couple more, because there's probably more employees at the university.
And maybe Parkland as well, because you get like a lot of, more kind of.
ISTC could do that too.
Even with the, with the aldermen, it's, hey, I've been alerted of this opportunity. I want you guys all to be energy independent, come and learn more. No obligation, so.
So, yeah, so this is really the last one, and since MREA would hold the contract, so Peter will be doing several of these pieces. So we're gonna just talk about the next steps here.
So right now we have a draft RFP. We're still working on the finishing touches on that, but one of the next steps for this group would be to review that. Any lingering questions or considerations would go into that. As far as the timeline, I think we want to move it up a little bit. We revised the timeline a bit.
And for clarity, when we're talking about an advisory group for the solar, UC Solar. We're talking about the SAC, or we're proposing the SAC and also some people from other cities and unincorporated to try and round out the representation. So we have people from not just Urbana doing a countywide program, but people from the whole county doing a countywide program. We've just chosen to sort of locate it in the SAC because you are already coming here.
So ideally, we'd like to have an installer selected by October 16th. So that tightens the timeline up a bit. But we've got plenty of time. It's only September 8th right now. I think we've got plenty of time. We've already got a draft ready to go for the most part. The second, designate internal champions. That basically just means among this advisory group, just what you guys already started doing. Who would be the good partners to work with? Who would have? What are some large employers in your networks that might be willing to schedule a lunch and learn, like Sarah mentioned? The university, the city. What commitments can we get from all of you in terms of, or at least ideas in terms of where to focus our energy for doing outreach and promotion for this stuff? And then external marketing partners as well. So our typical strategy is to identify local either environmental organizations, faith groups, co-ops, credit unions, any type of member organization or advocacy organization, affinity groups. That really helps get the word out. It's kind of obvious to some extent, but identifying good partners and partners who will be enthusiastic about it and will commit to sharing with their networks, it makes all the difference. Let's see. And then, we've just got a couple more meetings.
So did you say those meetings are changing, those dates?
So,
Go back to this.
yeah, given the timeline.
So we already knew that the once a month SAC meeting wasn't going to be frequent enough for us to get through the first couple pieces of this process. So we're probably looking at something like every 2 weeks, but the exact dates we don't have fully set yet.
And the reason that we don't have the full dates is that the actual bid date for that November procurement has not been announced yet, and then there's a pre-registration date that the installer would have to register. And so we would have to have all of our contract essentially finalized before that date. And I think it's going to be a little bit earlier than what we had anticipated, but not by much. But essentially what I think it means is that we would want to just move everything a little bit more tightened and finalize the contract by that, where it says review RFP responses. So it would actually, we want to finalize the contract then so that they can register the next week.
So in order to do that, there are really 4 things that we should probably finish tonight, or try to at least. First of which is just general understanding of the concept. Any lingering questions that you guys may have, you should close them now, if possible. And if you get home and anything comes up, let's talk about it as soon as possible, so we can, if it causes a change to the RFP, we can get that in there. We need to set a goal in SRX. So we should talk about that a little bit. We should talk about branding. And if any of you can commit to helping with outreach, or if we can get that list started. And Scott's already generated a really solid list of local partners, local potential partners to work with.
So the first sitting lingering questions on the big idea.
There's the part about modifying the city's permitting structure that you had mentioned. Is that involved in this?
So those are 3 different projects. This is one of them. One is planning, zoning, permitting. 2 is a city PPA for city facilities. 3 is a solar purchase program for the community. So the first 2 are kind of internal for a city. The last one is the one that we're talking about.
But I will say that permitting process, of the 2,100 people that signed up for the Chicago, some of them got trapped in a bad permitting process and had to abandon their projects because they weren't in a city that had a good, solid understanding of solar permitting. So the fact that Urbana already
does, but is even doing more, is essential in this entire process.
Okay, but it's in parallel.
Okay.
Makes a
And,
lot of sense.
so you mentioned earlier that if I need an electrical box, there'd be other fee items. One of the other things that came up with an install recently was just the structural assessment. That's one thing that just the solar installer would just have that in their list of things that they would be part of.
Yeah, it depends on whether or not the permit requires a structural assessment or not, so I don't have a specific answer for you right now. We'd have to, there might be some.
It might be a little different for residential than it would be for commercial.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, what was the second thing?
Setting the goal for the SREC.
Number of kilowatts that we think we're gonna install in 3 months.
So,
Right.
so what's a typical house?
5 kilowatts. So we
And
have
how many personal residences do we have in the city?
16,000 in Urbana.
And do you know how many are in Champaign?
I would guess double.
So it's
Savoy, maybe half. 8,000 single-family residents.
another way to go about thinking about this is we could take Milwaukee for an example, because we break it up into neighborhoods. When we do one of these, the first time we did it, we got 17 homeowners and they installed 52 kilowatts capacity. Second time we did it, we
How
had
many homeowners?
17 homeowners, 52 kilowatts.
in one neighborhood.
In one neighborhood. We're seeing average system sizes 3.4 kilowatts.
Yeah, 3 makes sense.
So, but if we do commercial, they're going to be larger. So, the second time we did it, we had 38 homeowners and 136 kilowatts. The third time we did it, we had 13 homeowners and 48 kilowatts, and then this past time we're wrapping up next week. We're already at 62 kilowatts, and we've got 19 homeowners.
Okay, but.
So,
Right.
to put it into perspective, you don't have to get that many homeowners involved to get a significant, relatively significant, like biddable 80 kilowatts. But it's somewhat of a challenge. Like this outreach is such a crucial component. It's a challenge to get those homeowners.
So, in the chart you had about how many people, how many registrants there were and how many projects there were, that didn't give any indication of the size of the community, the size of the outreach. So was it like 5% of the people who you reached out to? Was it 1%? Do you know that?
It's all less than 1%. It's more like 1 out of every 2,000 or something like that.
As far as participants that came to sessions,
No, that followed through and signed a contract
all through.
and installed.
Or even like people that got the information. I mean, think about it was the greater Chicagoland area.
Can you put that chart up?
Sure.
So say you get notified about this, and then you go to an info session. That's already a filter. Like hearing about it and then actually showing up to an info session, that's a filter. Going to an info session and then getting a site assessment, that's another filter. Getting a site assessment and then deciding your finances are in order, everything's looking good, you can afford to do this, and you're going to do it in the deadline, like by the deadline. That's another filter. So the volume of people that you reach really gets constricted by the end of the process.
So we need to hit a lot of people.
Do we know how hard it is to add solar in the unincorporated areas of the county or some of the smaller towns around here? Do we have any idea?
It's easier.
The order of operations is right on top of that pile.
Well, I'll tell you, we will find out. We will find out through this process, because if somebody has a very terrible permitting process, they're not going to get any solar built. And so.
But luckily we also, and these things take a lot of time, but luckily we have Brian Ross, who's doing all this permitting, planning, zoning, technical assistance, and he may or may not have the capacity to add another municipality or a county to review their documents at least.
But we'll have a good template anyway.
We will.
Yeah.
So.
And even during the Chicago one, the city of Wilmette or Village of Wilmette was a partner, and they had to tweak their permitting ordinance in the middle, and were able to do it without much fluctuation to the whole process. So if the city's committed, and says, oh my gosh, I see this is coming, I wanna learn, if there is a problem, I'm ready to address it, then it's not a problem.
Can we go back, I can't remember just back or forth, but to the cost slide showing the different discounts, the theoretical, the last illustration of 5.
No, you were there.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry.
This
There,
one?
yeah.
Yes. So direct purchase, does that represent an approximation of the sticker price for a 5 kilowatt system?
It's,
If the Rex came in there, if the 30%
if
discounts were there?
the base price is $4 a watt,
Mhm.
which is probably high, truthfully. Maybe not, I don't know what.
It's been 3 around here.
Yeah, okay, so that's high. So this was just for
Oh,
illustration
no,
purposes.
just for illustration.
Yeah,
Okay, you didn't have all those discounts in place for those prior sales, but, I don't know, to me.
Just the bulk discount.
Yeah, to me mentally trying to think about where we might get, if that's about what it would cost, for an own system. And the PPA is different, that's like the pay-as-you-go kind of thing.
that's the case you go, that's right.
So remember, we pretty much have a minimum goal, which is 80 kilowatts, because that's the minimum that the installer has to bid into the SREC sale.
That was the 16 homes.
Yeah, 16 to 20 homes, depending on the sizes, right?
Or 54 commercial systems.
Right. So if we only get bids for direct purchase, you're not gonna sell as many. If we get a bid for PPA, we might be able to do twice as many. So something to consider. And then also, if we're able to open it up to commercial, you could have, just a couple of takers take up all of the SRECs.
Well, Parkland could do it right now, couldn't they?
Well, they have to
And the
be
system.
under 25 kilowatts to get into this particular SREC
Each
sale.
system does.
Each system.
Yeah.
So-
Can we do it at the U of I? Sounds like we could.
If you wanted to do it
At least,
27.
just one.
Yeah,
We'll do it on ISTC.
yeah, you could.
With the PPA.
You'd have to, yeah, you wanna do the PPA so that you get the tax credit. But as long as there's a meter that you can, an individual meter that you can plug into there, that's no problem. No. Yeah, so I mean, that's the conundrum here is we don't wanna shoot too high, but we don't wanna, sell ourselves out for, we could do a good job here, so.
So the goal that we're talking about now has implications for the bid documents
Yes.
and what people are gonna be
Yes,
speccing their
yes.
prices on.
And probably the people that are gonna answer.
So when you did the Milwaukee system, you said you worked by neighborhood, so were the neighborhood's goals then aggregated for the RFP?
We don't have SRECs, so we don't set goals. We have a utility that's very resistant to solar, and we're seeing in the most challenging utility territory, possibly in the country, we're still seeing this adoption.
Right.
So this is my personal fight with the utility to be look, there's all these people who still want to do it, even though you hate us. But so I have a lot of fun with this. This is my.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is that energy policy is so state-based and sometimes utility-based that we can't perfectly replicate whatever somebody else has done. But we learn a lot from all the other things that all the other bulk programs that have gone on, and we'll just do the best we can with what we have.
As far as, so the other hurdles are, so you mentioned that there might be some utility hurdles which maybe aren't as much of an issue, just anecdotally here. But so hurdles are, so for a person, whether they have money to pay for even a discounted price, whether they have a treeless roof, whether they have a south-facing roof, whether they have new shingles on their roof, or any sort of other structural issues that are going to raise the cost a whole lot.
And we, yes, and we would want to screen, that's why having people come to the thing, where you can screen them on all those things to begin with.
You Google Earth to start with.
Google Earth, and you say, do you know how old your roof is? And they're like, oh, my roof's 19 years old. Well, we're not putting solar up there until you get a new roof. And that's not part of this price. You're probably not a great candidate. Or you have just turrets and crap all over your roof. You're just not a good candidate. I'm sorry. I hope you get solar someday, but that's just not going to happen today. And then that helps reduce that customer acquisition cost, because then the solar company does not have to send somebody out to site assess or build a proposal. So.
And we've had several installations in town that have had some east and west facing roofs and have been happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, is that completely off the table, or would that just be up to the installer to decide whether they want to?
Every system will be different. If you have you know, for kind of house, that's the technical term, right? You might want to do south and west, and that's up to you or the installer to try and negotiate.
Sure.
How about 250?
Phyllis?
People?
Is that too high? 150. Let's double the minimum.
Another way to think about it is we could set one goal, like say the minimum 80 if we only get direct purchase bids, but double that if we also get a bid that allows for PPA. So maybe 160.
Is it a problem to do the minimum of 80?
Nope. It's not a problem. You will get less people that will bid on that, potentially. Because some of the companies, you know, for 16 systems, it's hard for them to go through the process of answering the RFP or not. It may not be even if we said we're going to give you 1,000 systems. So it's just. I would recommend that we double what the minimum is.
What about
particularly for allowing commercial systems?
What about the number of houses with solar on the roof right now? Is it 5? Is it 15? Well, how many houses?
Current houses in Urbana.
And Champaign.
And I mean, I can think of probably 10, but that might be double that or.
So those are the early adopters
Right.
who are willing to pay almost
They're going to pay
any cost.
20,000.
What we're looking for are the fence sitters who are interested, but there's barriers to them. And we're removing those barriers, one of which is cost.
And some people,
So those people are still out there.
they won't even look at it from like an environmental point of view. They'll be looking at it in terms of, you know, bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, we hope that all the environmentalists sign up, but I really want to get to the people that are going to do it.
Or at least one of the 2 married people is looking at it from environmental
That's
standpoint.
right. That's right. And I'll tell you this, from the business perspective, you have to guarantee the savings. Otherwise, there's very few businesses that can justify.
Even a 7-year payback is still more than 2 years.
Right. Right.
So Sarah, were you recommending 160 regardless of whether we get a PPA offer as well?
No. I think that we should. I think that your idea of kind of bifurcating the bid is actually a pretty good one. That if you're able to offer us some unique financing, we are willing to double the amount of outreach that we're doing. And truthfully, you know, depending on who answers, they might actually want to do more, but we're only guaranteeing a minimum. So if we find more people, good for them. And we're not even guaranteeing.
We're not even guaranteeing it. Right?
Yeah. We're
more of making an indication of what the bidders should bid into.
Yes.
The installers should bid into the SREC.
Right.
Well, it's a question of how likely do we think this will be taken.
Right.
And I've heard people say, I really ought to get solar. Is it affordable yet?
Right.
So then we can say, it's affordable.
Hopefully there's some
Hey, you can do it for $5,000.
Right.
Okay, how many people?
Yeah.
I've heard it almost 3 people.
16 people.
We all know a few.
Yeah.
Well, that's enough, right?
5% of those that we know will work out.
And most of the people that signed up for the Chicago one did not self-identify as like environmental. They were like, this makes sense to me because, you know, my payback is going to be 5 years or whatever it was, and then for me it's free money essentially after that. So that's what we're shooting for here.
Because this kind of sounds like what's going on now with the cable company. Like there's a
The ITV.
ITV.
Second cable company.
Yeah, there's a second cable company, and they're going each part of the neighborhoods. They're trying to get a certain percentage of the residents to
50%.
tie in. And then once they get that, then they install it, and then the next neighborhoods around and try and.
But we have
Fiber optic.
I got it. Okay.
So it's kind of like you're competing against the neighbors to try and get enough people for them to install it, and then once you get that, then you're.
We have some of that built in too, probably in the bid documents. So we hopefully get a bid that says if the whole community, you know, signs up for X amount or installs 80 or 160 or whatever that threshold is, everybody gets a discount.
Yeah, that's the piece that we missed. I forgot about that. some people won't do it. In Chicago, some people did, some people didn't. And essentially, what the base price was $349, and then with every 100 kilowatts, they dropped it by 15 cents, and after 400 kilowatts, they dropped it by 50 cents or something like that. So everybody got a bigger discount the more people that signed up.
So a little bit of a peer pressure to talk to your friends.
In Milwaukee, we're seeing base prices of $325 for American-made components, and then basically every 50 kilowatts it comes down. So 50 kilowatts it went from $325 to $319, 100 kilowatts $319 to $316, 150. I think it got down to $312.
Closer to
And they're getting, and then the customers are getting a rebate check. They after some of them have their solar panels installed, and the installer, we hit the deadline of the installer, so right, this is how many people have signed contracts, or if they put down a down payment or whatever, they'll get a rebate check. So that's, for a lot of them, that's like a big victory. And a good reason to refer friends.
So 80-160 or 160-320?
How about 100 and 150?
100-150?
It's 20 people, essentially, 20 to 25 homes.
Yeah, that's the other way of thinking, because I was thinking it might be better to think about it as far as homes in not a big number. Because the original number was 16 homes.
It's like 20 to 30 homes.
And you double the 16 homes, then you're talking 20, 30 homes.
For the whole county?
Yeah, the one if you're higher.
Well,
So,
Even though there are-
this is the
it's a
minimum
short
that
time
we're
frame.
kind of saying, we think we can get these number of customers, but we're willing to find more. More people come, and if you want to take that risk to bid in more, you take that risk to bid in more. And we'll keep doing outreach for the entire 3 months and get as many people as we can. And if they decide that they want to, and then they can decide that they want to. Additionally, they cannot decide that we want to, and if we, like I said before, if we get a ton of people to sign up and they just don't have the capacity because they don't, we can bid those people into the March.
yeah, that's good.
And,
We have a backstop.
and if there's way too many, it's not very much time, but if there were way too many people that installed, at least then those are pre-identified.
Yes.
Maybe those people would,
Right.
be able to get another following one, less official
Right.
type of program. But it is not, it's not that much time. I think it's doable to do it in a short period of time. I think there's, it's nice to take the bull by the horns, but as far as beating down the doors, you're only going to get so many people in 3 months.
The sense of urgency is useful from
It is
marketing.
useful.
Yes, it is, and you don't want, and people, so what we did in Chicago is we did outreach for 3 months, and then there was 1 month at the end that if they hadn't already finalized their contract, they have to finalize their contract, because you don't want people hanging out there for very long. So the benefit is that we now have 2 months to kind of 2.5 months to plan our outreach, and in Chicago we had about 2 weeks. So, because we put out the RFP and then we're like, we're going to get people to start doing this. So we can plan all those outreach, set up those meetings now, and that goes a long way.
And then all 3 of you aren't going to come back for each outreach meeting, I assume, but
Marketing materials and print.
just provide us with some stuff?
We will brand it, and we do want your opinion on that. You saw the Milwaukee one that had a hand. The Chicago one had a sign that's, it's up there. It's people, though, right? Yeah, it's people. And both of those had hair trademarks, so we couldn't do it.
We could use that hand.
Oh, we can use the hand. There you go.
We should use that. I don't know where the hand came from.
Wait, but I thought you did say that you had people who would do the outreach.
Right, so
We don't.
Right.
So-
So you personally don't have to do it.
MREA, we're an education and training organization. So we train solar installers. We do all this consumer-facing outreach all the time. This is a large chunk of what I do for this grant. So I work with local partners all the time. We have specific training modules. So when we identify a local partner who's enthusiastic about hosting some of these, we can train them in how to host them, give them all the materials, scripts, like down to everything. It's all handouts that might be part of the info sessions, and then we have a budget to pay them as well. So we will have, we'll have people locally, doing this, based on local partners.
And in terms of emails, like the email blast, you can invite people to the info sessions, it's all scripted and provided. And then the materials are, I mean, obviously you can personalize them if you want to, but like, you know, with the key facts in there. All that stuff, that's our job. That's the technical assistance that we're providing.
We didn't settle on a goal, I think.
I know.
Yeah, it's 100 and 150.
I think it's going to be double if it's with a PPA.
Yeah, 100 and 200?
It's just such it's no money up front. I mean, that's all place.
So 100 and 200 would be how many customers? That would be the 20 to 40 customers?
20 houses and 4 businesses and we're done.
If it is only homeowners and that owner is going to get between a 3 and 6 kilowatt system, you know, you need 30-some for 100 kilowatts.
So there's a lower threshold where folks are going to be interested or not interested in even bidding on the project. Which is a squishy number, but in thought, I mean, you said if we went for 80, that's going to be marginal.
So I talked to some of the national installers about this idea, and the reason that they didn't bid on the Chicago one is truthfully because we didn't have this SREC market, so they couldn't guarantee savings, not having played it in the market yet. Now they know they can guarantee savings, and so they said, and I can't quote them all because there's a ton of them, but they said if this is an agreement where you're going to find the customers for us and we have to offer the attractive pricing, that would interest a lot of folks. They also know that there's a limited amount that's going to be contracted through this auction, so they're not going to get 10,000 customers, even though they want that. So, you know, I don't know. Hopefully that's why we get people to pair up, so that maybe it's somebody offering finance, but it's the local installer that is really the boots on the ground.
Okay, tentatively 100 and 200. We got 12 minutes left. Branding, is that the next on the list?
Branding is next on the list.
So you touched on that a little bit already, that you guys are going to take the lead on that, consult with us locally.
So we're calling it DC Solar. It's
Somewhere.
not on here.
No, that's fine.
Solar.
It's on the first line.
Yeah. Oh, it was. There it is. Only because, you know, that's very simple to understand.
You in the right place to describe.
What? Thanks, God. You know, I think in terms of branding, we want a simple, simple little, we can come up with a couple ideas and throw them at you guys and you guys can respond. We just didn't want to ask for thoughts on what you think really pops for folks.
Simple is good. Yeah, I mean, it's county-wide. I hate to go with Champaign Solar, but, or Champaign County Solar, but
Yeah, but
it seems not quite the right frame. I mean, I appreciate the work.
I agree. But I was thought of Champaign County, wondering if Champaign County Solar would be more inclusive.
Thought about that too. In talking with folks, there seems to be it seems to be unclear when you say Champaign County that you're not specifically talking about unincorporated. I don't know if everyone agrees, but it seems like Champaign County means unincorporated. And while we do want to include unincorporated people as being potential participants, if we had to choose, definitely letting municipal residents know that they're in versus definitely letting unincorporated. You choose municipal because there's a lot more, in terms of population.
I think using solar is nice and simple, and the outreach should handle the confusion if there is inclusivity.
One clarification that I didn't include, rentals in this kind, right?
Yes.
We think we will have to check to see if they have what their metering policy is, and if it's bad, then people in rental would not be included.
So now I am.
There are municipal.
Yeah, if they're not, they own their own electric grid, and this is kind of contingent on net metering, which is
Seems less likely than that.
yeah.
That's
Other branding considerations? Is the look on in the picture, is that,
That's
any
it.
thoughts on that?
I don't like the lack of diversity in that picture.
Yes.
It was the first thing I noticed about your slide presentation.
Oh. I'm gonna make that outside.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we have a fairly diverse community, and I think that people pick up on that.
Should we not do, so, should we not have people on it?
We may have to
You
stay
just
around.
include a few houses with a couple different families,
Yeah.
and then you can have a couple
Well, we
different
want
houses
both
as
a
well.
logo and kind of a branding, right? So,
We can work on,
Yeah.
we can work on something and send it along. You know, I totally agree with that.
And it looks a little bit California.
It looks very.
Oh, well, definitely.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Maybe put a tree that doesn't go over the roof.
This one up on.
That is not allowed.
This is
A palm
not a
tree.
tree.
Yeah. Does it need to have do we need to put the location in the name? Or maybe it's, let's get solar or something like that?
No, that's true, yeah.
Something that takes us
Yeah.
away from trying to designate the specific location?
So one thing, that's a good point. One thing that maybe happens when you take away the local flavor of it is that people might think that it's some kind of like national sales pitch. And people don't like to be pitched to, generally speaking, like they don't want to be sold to, I should say. So if you have the local flavor to it, or at least the local name, people take pride in, their locale.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anyone that doesn't have the locale in the name. Even when companies have done this, it's been like 3M goes solar, and then it's just an employee program, but you definitely want to feel like you're special because you got the deal, right? And I'm, Urbana Champaign, so I get the deal.
And that's one criticism I have with customer power is that it doesn't say made or ran on it. So,
We found this in Milwaukee, playing neighborhoods off each other. There's a rivalry between neighborhoods and we work quite well. We do that solar West.
for instance, you being first in that title right there, already touches on rivalry, which is okay.
I'm pretty sure they should call it neutral cycle solar. What do you think?
We could have Urbana Solar and Champaign Solar and pretend that they're two different programs and see who can get on. Whatever, then everybody would benefit from it.
One of the reasons I was leaving that one slide up here was I was hoping somebody would say we have to be Chicago. But I don't know, 440 kW support. I'm from downstate, so. Yeah. Well, okay.
So I agree that UC Solar is okay, especially with all the fun, like, now you're gonna see it
Yeah.
phrase.
Right,
I
Simple and fine.
don't think we would be successful with like a line of solar.
No, probably not.
I just don't think now's a good time.
Yeah.
Champagne,
Champagne is solar.
champagne mom.
You said that.
You said it's just, okay. Suit your-
Lord, it's so hard.
Are we still recording?
Is there any, the last thing is commit to outreach, and I think that, we identified, it sounds like you guys have a really good sense of who's going to be good to partner with. So we just need to take some next steps in terms of getting folks to sign on to help promote and do outreach.
So first would be kind of the next meeting where we're gonna look at some further documents. Is the SAC okay taking the lead in scheduling the next meeting with our technical assistance providers and inviting our folks from other cities and unincorporated to join and review?
What do we do at the week? What do we do at the week before the 28th? Since we're trying to tighten stuff, and I'll be out of town that week.
Ideally,
I'll be
yeah.
around 28.
to move everything up just a smidge.
So like the,
So the week of the 23rd,
21st.
21st, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of,
is it 28?
So those 2 weeks from now.
Are you all in regular communication throughout the week, or is it, okay,
Maybe it was
not,
not.
trying to keep meetings?
So it's Tuesday nights.
Just FYI, I might find that there is a cold launch thing on Tuesday night.
Where's that at?
Okay, I should have my Caroline's. I don't know if it really matters. It probably doesn't.
Yeah, bring them on over.
Right.
Crush their
Another day, yeah.
So we're talking about the 22nd, that's the Tuesday.
Yeah, we would do, that week. Unless we don't want to do it in case we think we're going to lose people from the college meeting.
Any day that week works for me.
Council meeting,
Oh.
that meeting. You never know.
Wednesday evenings are difficult for me.
If we've decided on the name of this program, I could start talking about it all the time as people ask me about the solar farm. Right now, like tomorrow.
Like, I was hoping there was any sort of initial info that I could share about people. Whether it's the presentation or some sort of.
It sounds like what's the marketing materials.
Yeah.
We can share the presentation with you, and then I think just at the next meeting, what we want to do is make sure that we're done with essentially, we have our outreach, on these commercial lists of our outreach partners that are going to have either committed or we think will commit.
And that's sort of what I was wondering.
I think there's still time, I mean, but we want them to commit pretty soon, so that we can start scheduling stuff, but then, you know, get the RFP out immediately thereafter, and then really get ready to
Monday is the last proposal, right?
Well, I said it's always.
Oh, right, council.
So I think Wednesday is on the table.
Or Thursday, right?
Or Thursday.
What's Tuesday? Oh, Tuesday's the full hour.
It's not, I didn't mean it.
Of those, Thursday would be best for me, but I could do any of them.
I can't do Wednesday.
What about Thursday?
Thursday at 7.
That's the 24th.
And I don't know if you guys have to be here in person or if you can call in and my word.
I would, yeah. Much prefer to call.
Right, yeah, that's-
Now that you know who we are,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
space the name.
So Thursday, the 24th, set that meeting.
And we're inviting the other people who could participate?
Sure.
And is this a 2-hour meeting? Do we need to plan 2 hours?
It's planned for 1 hour.
Yeah.
So they will be sort of have documents in advance that you could review, so for the RFP especially and for branding. So really it would be, if you have questions, but I don't think we'd be creating anything, during the meeting, so I think it could be brief.
So this isn't necessarily an outreach type of meeting, this is more just us conducting business meeting.
Right,
So not inviting.
I think you could.
So we're going to expand the advisory committee for this program.
Yes.
And anybody that we add to the advisory committee, we would include.
Yes.
So we wouldn't invite just random.
Yeah, so if you have, get with me on that, and I think we want to get a couple more people who are not Urbana residents engaged so that our outreach is broader.
So for instance, if there was a really engaged local person who already has solar, or already proselytizes it perhaps.
But yes, perhaps, but really I'm thinking about like if the like in the university, can we have somebody that's a community partner that's advisory council that's going to be the point person at the university for this? Is that right? Okay. You told me that was like 2 hours.
case you didn't pick up on that, that's
Okay, never mind. We have like a big employer, like so in Chicago, it was the counties, the Chicago, the other cities, and
We
then.
really need someone from Carl Hospital. Anyone friends with
Their
them?
benefits are really tight.
Craft and Dark, that's pretty good place
All
too.
large employers would be doing people
East of
like that.
Silica.
Or the local chamber conference wants to be a partner in this.
I can ask them. I'll ask them.
See, every time I say something, somebody's first. So then now I don't know what to say. I don't know all the way.
We need the economic development.
One other question, Maria, we should probably be advertise public meetings for SEC since it's kind of
Yeah,
public
since-
business
right.
and there's more to.
More than an enjoyed quorum.
Yeah.
So,
For everybody else, it's a meeting for them to participate, but for SAC, it's an open meeting.
I was thinking we should get somebody from Parkland probably tour. Say they just listen to it open meeting.
You mentioned Sierra, but we don't really need, just participate, we don't really need at this point, advertising partners, really looking more like solid.
Institutional partners,
It's
so to
like,
speak.
why not just invite everybody from the county practitioners?
Oh.
Well, I brought it up at our last meeting
Yeah.
and invited folks.
When I checked with Lacey today, she came out, City of Champaign, she said that it was busy. I don't know if that's there or not.
I think we're still hopeful that, though, that the Alderman looks outreach, you get the city.
Great.
Annie's in Champaign.
Yep. So, but it would be awesome to try to face city council.
So US Lacey and US Lacey.
She said that they're not, the staff are not able to participate in tribute time.
That's what she told us.
UCSolar.com is available, so.
Yay.
Do you have an image in your head?
It's getting there.
Okay.
Think about it on Thursday.
You guys, so ISBA is part of, has given some events down here recently as well, but different than MREA, is that, really?
IACA was also part of the Solar Chicago. Now, they had to take a step back because it's their members that were bidding on the RFP, and they would do, I'll talk to Leslie tomorrow, they'll do that probably the same. But they helped with outreach, they did a couple of the solar socials, and I think you guys going to do that as well.
Just double checking on any toes or anything.
No, I think they understand that it's a little bit weird when.
Yeah. Likewise, if one of us happened to talk to somebody who was a solar installer, is there any sort of like, university issues with talking about bids and things like that?
No, because you are not the owner of this bid, it is MREA, so I would just say, oh, great, I will tell Peter to make sure that you're on the bid notification, or the RFP notification list. No, I mean, that's kind of the nice thing, is that that MREA is the contract holder, so the city and the, this is not a binding thing on this thing.
Was that mentioned in the text at one point in here? I was thinking, it's kind of nice to have that as a note. And do you remember if it was in the PowerPoint?
We actually put it on the PowerPoint.
And maybe it's not a big issue, I don't know, I just feel
Well,
like
it's on,
every
go back
thing
one
I
more.
go to, I
Go
walk
back,
around.
no, back, that, see, so project management, and then down here.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
this is hidden, but it's on there.
Anything else?
So I'll revise the dates on here, clean it up a little bit, and then send it to you, Scott, and then you're welcome to share it
Thanks for coming, guys.
with me. Thank you.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, this is
All right, do we have anything else on this item? Okay. Well, so you know,
Is this anything that requires a motion, or we just do it?
I don't think so, I think we just do it.
It's part of your existing
Well-
plan, right? It's part of your roadmap and plan.
Unless, I don't know, do we need any sort of a motion that we're,
I don't think so.
Even
okay.
for the goal,
Pardon?
even for the goals that we set?
Yeah, probably eventually.
No, I don't even think that, and
Yeah.
I would ask, but because you're not the contract, you're just kind of advising, you're not actually,
Mhm.
if Peter goes back and says, screw that, then, he can theoretically go wherever he wants in the RFP.
We said 100, 200, right?
All right, I guess it probably wouldn't hurt just to check with legal to see if we would need something, and then if we do need some sort of a motion, we could just do it at the beginning of the next meeting. Okay, because we're gonna post that as a public meeting anyway, so, all right. We don't have any other business before us. Are there any announcements before we close? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
Those opposed? All right, great. Adjourned.